Before we continue on learning about edits, I wanted to share some techniques for capturing audio. This will be very important if you're trying to capture any sort of audio, especially if you're trying to use audio from an interview type of situation where you're perhaps filming someone and they might be a little bit farther away from you and you just might not have adequate equipment for capturing sound. So this is a low-tech technique that works really well, and it will definitely enhance any sort of sound that you may be capturing. What I have to start off with is to have some video with linked audio, and this is reminiscent of some sort of interview. I'm actually using myself for this example. So what we have here is we have a subject that is being interviewed, and the camera is a little bit farther away from the person we're interviewing. So if I play you a little bit of our audio, you'll find that the audio is very difficult to hear. So let's just take a listen.
You can catch some really great days, and you can really see some amazing wild.
As you can see and hear, it's very difficult to understand what is being said. And that's because when this particular clip was being filmed, the camera, and in this case I was just using a phone, was positioned farther away from the subject so we could have the subject fit in the frame. And the audio is just not very clear because the phone is far away from our subject. And this could be compounded if you're trying to film someone outside where maybe there is background noise like traffic or wind or something like that. It can really impact your device being able to pick up the audio. So without having to use any sort of expensive microphones or extra sound equipment, there is a pretty good technique that you can use, and all you'll really need is two phones. So if you're filming someone else, you might be able to borrow their phone or simply use one from a friend or family member. And that's what I did here. So I have my main interview, but if you look carefully, you can see on the cushion right next to the person, there is a phone. And what I'm doing here is I'm picking up the exact same audio simultaneously with this phone. So the video and audio are being recorded from my phone that we can't see, that's outside of the frame. And then this phone is very close proximity to the subject, so the audio is able to pick it up much better. Here is my interview audio, and for right now I'm just going to drag this into the timeline a little bit farther away. And if I play this, you can kind of already see the waveform is more visible. But if we play it, the video is nothing because the camera is facing down, but the audio, you'll be able to hear it.
Amazing creatures that we have in our local waters. I don't think most people consider.
What we ultimately want to do here is we want to use the audio from this interview audio clip, and we're going to delete the video because it's really nothing. And then we can either choose to delete the audio from the original clip or just play them simultaneously. And we can determine that once we get into this. I'll expand my audio tracks so that the waveform has a little bit more room to breathe. And I'm going to do the same thing on my audio 2 track. And then we'll just go ahead and position this at the beginning of our timeline. And I'm going to right click on my interview audio and choose to unlink so that I can just delete the video. We don't need that portion. If we zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut of plus, and let's get to the beginning. And if you watch the beginning of the video, you'll see that here is my chair, here is the phone that I'm using for audio, and let me just mute both of the audio tracks for a second. If we play this, you're going to see that my subject is going to come into frame, and then she's going to turn on the phone, which will begin recording, and you can see right here where there's a clap. I always like to have some sort of clap so that you have something very distinct that you can sync the audio up to. So if we zoom in a little bit more by clicking plus, this is the waveform for the clap right here. And if we look at the beginning of this second clip, you can see there's a similar type of waveform. Because the original video and interview with the bad audio was already rolling and then we started the audio only clip a little bit later, they don't sync up. Then that's not a problem because we're not using the video from here anyways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to position my mouse right at the initial part of the clap and I'm going to set a marker. So I'll use M to do that, and I'm going to make sure nothing is selected so that when I set the marker, it puts it on the timeline window. If you set a marker when you have the clip selected, like if I have this clip selected and I select M, the marker gets placed on the actual clip. And sometimes you might want that, but if you want to have it on the timeline, then you'll need to make sure nothing is selected. Let's zoom in a little bit more, and you'll see that the waveform maybe starts a tiny bit after our marker, which is okay. We're going to just go ahead and move this other clip over so that we can find the clap waveform, which is right here. If you want to have a little bit more precision when you're moving the second clip, you can hold down your Command or Control key, and then if you just click your right and left arrow keys on the keypad, you can nudge the item over by 1 frame at a time. That looks pretty good. Let's just play this, and I'm going to make sure that both of these tracks are not muted. I had originally muted my audio 2 track, so let's unmute that. And let's make sure audio 1 is also unmuted. And what we'll do is we'll just play the timeline in here if the claps do indeed sync up. And I might just watch the mouth of my subject to see as she starts talking if the lip movements sync with what's being said.
Hi there, my name is Emily and I spend a lot of time swimming and free diving.
Okay, perfect. So that is actually sounding much better. And as you can see, we've improved our audio substantially by just having this waveform that was closer to the subject. So that is the first tip that I'm going to give you. And this technique works really well. If you're interviewing someone and they're standing, they could almost be holding the phone or the device and just have it be out of frame. You can try all sorts of creative ways to allow the device to be very close to the person, and in that way you'll be able to pick up the audio because of proximity. The other thing that I wanted to point out is when I'm filming something like this is I try to just do it all in one take. Now obviously that is really hard to do, especially if you don't have some sort of script, if the person is just kind of talking about some sort of subject that they're familiar with. And even if they have a script, there's a good chance they're going to make a mistake. What you can do, and what I would recommend, is that you tell your subject or subjects that they're talking, and if they do mess up, they just say something like redo or rephrase. And then they just redo it. And in that way, it's very easy to identify those areas that you need to eliminate, and you can simply delete them. If we have a listen with our audio, you'll hear that I do that. So let me just move the playback head up a little bit. And if I play from here, you'll see that I'm talking and then I'm going to say rephrase a couple times and repeat something similar to what I just said. So take a listen.
Are in our local waters. Probably some of the most well-known sharks are the leopard sharks.
So you can see that it took me about 2 times to get that sentence right. So if we go ahead and zoom in here a little bit, we can remove the area that is not necessary. And what I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select all of these clips and we're going to group them together. So I'm going to use clip, group, and this will allow us, just in case we end up selecting the clips or moving them, they'll all move together. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set an out point right before I get it right. So I'll set an out point right here. And then I'm just going to back up a little bit. Let me zoom out so I can see where I am. And let's find out where I mess up twice.
In our local waters.
Okay, so it's right about here. Okay, so this is pretty much where I want to get rid of. So I'm going to set an endpoint right there. And now I've designated this area that I want to eliminate. So now that we have marked this section, I want to get rid of it. And we have a number of ways that we can do this. What we need to do is we need to slice this clip. So we could use our razor blade, which we've talked about in an earlier segment. And if we do click the razor blade, we would have to select both of the clips and cut them. So that is one method. Let's go ahead and undo our razor blade tool. So I'm just going to switch back to my selection tool and we'll go ahead and click undo a few times. And then I'm going to, rather than having my in and out points, I'm going to use a marker. So I'm going to set a marker at this spot just to kind of mark it. Let's just clear our in and out, and then we'll put a marker here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to place my playback head at the marker. You can use Shift M to jump to a marker, or if you want to go back, you would use Command Shift M or Control Shift M on the PC. So that allows you to move from marker to marker. And now I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut of Command K. Command K is a quick way that you can initiate a cut, and it's going to cut all of the clips in your timeline. So rather than using the razor blade tool, it's actually quicker for me just to use Command K. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then we're simply going to select this portion of the clip. But you can see when I click on my clip, I'm selecting everything. And the reason we're selecting everything is because we grouped these items together. So at this point, we need to ungroup. We're going to go back to clip, ungroup, and now I can simply select this area right here. I'm just going to right click and perform a ripple delete, and the ripple delete is going to delete and pull everything over to the left. So what we're going to end up here with is something called a jump cut. So if I play this section, watch the subject carefully.
Our local waters. Probably.
You can see how there's like a kind of a quick little nod of the head, and that's because we lifted or extracted a portion of the clip. This could be problematic if you just wanted to show the person talking, but normally what you do with an interview is you will only show some of the person talking, because if you had a 15-minute interview, it would be kind of boring to watch this person talk about the particular subject. But if you create B-roll footage, and B-roll footage is something that we use very commonly, B-roll describes all of the footage that isn't in the main action. This would be supplemental footage that would include all of the shots that don't include the principal subject that are talking to the camera. So instead of showing my talking head and having this jump cut appear, I'm going to place some supporting video over this section of the interview, and that will cover it up. And this creates more interest in your final piece because you're going to be showing other video that supports whatever it is that we're talking about. So for instance, in this particular interview, I'm talking about sharks, and I would take some shark footage and overlay that on top. So here I have a shark clip. I've already marked an endpoint. If I go ahead and target video 2 track, and I'm just going to uncheck audio because I don't want to bring in any audio. And if we just use an overwrite, you can see that this clip gets added in, and then we would have something like this.
Sharks here. Most people probably don't even realize how many sharks are in our local waters. Probably some of the most well-known sharks are the leopard sharks. These are a beautiful shark.
So you get the idea that we're only going to show a little bit of our interview subject talking, and then we're going to be layering in video clips that support what we're talking about, and in turn creating a much more interesting and layered sort of video project.